In order to reform the state legislature, you have to first look at what are the underlying causes of its dysfunctionality. In the Brennan report that came out in 2006-2007, ranked the New York State legislature as the most dysfunctional in the nation. They did a number of reforms at that report. It took them a couple of years before public outrage finally forced reforms. But the real problem is that the three leaders, the governor, the speaker, and the majority, have too much power. And that sets up the state for this dysfunctional characterization. The way to deal with it is to address that power structure, to decentralize the power, to empower individual legislators, and to open up the process. There are a number of substantial reforms that need to be done. First, we need a constitutional convention, in my opinion, to change the Constitution as it relates to the budget, so that the state budget automatically goes into effect April 1st, and we don't drag out for months and months and months without any budget. We need some definitive baseline budget that goes into effect on April 1st. The county government has that type of program, the city government has it, all the local governments have it. That doesn't say it's the final budget, because state legislatures, just like the county legislature, always have the power to amend the budget at any time during the year. But if you take the budget out from being a hostage, you dramatically reduce the power of the three men in the room. Second thing, so you require first is constitutional amendment to require on-time budget. Second, a constitutional amendment to restrict backdoor borrowing. The current Constitution says that any debt guaranteed by the taxpayers has to have the approval and a referendum. Well, what the state has been doing is borrowing billions and billions of dollars through public authorities with no guaranteed revenue stream that has a moral obligation of the state of New York behind it. It's an absolute transparent circumvention of the existing constitutional restrictions, and the Constitution should be amended to prohibit that. That's important because right now the three men in the room control that backdoor borrowing. The third thing, which is absolutely critical, is campaign finance reform. The most pressing issue is on the pay-to-play. Right now, an individual, for example, who is passionate can contribute up to a maximum of $3,800 in the assembly race. There's no limit on unions or PACs. Other specific recommendations. The committee chairman should have the authority to hire and fire their own staff. Because right now the staff of the committees are appointed by the leaders. The chairman don't even have the control of his own staff. Second, we should reduce the vote so that, say, 25% of the members of a committee can call a meeting. So you can force a meeting. Third, we should change the rules to require that a person must attend a committee in order for his vote to count. Right now they vote by proxies, and the chairman shows up with enough proxies to run a meeting without anybody, which is a real travesty. Fourth, we should require that every committee vote be recorded and publicly available so we know where our legislators are. The next issue that I think is really important is we need to open up the bill process, require bill numbers be assigned timely, to make it easier to do a motion to discharge and get things out on the floor. We need to strengthen the requirement for a fiscal note, especially as it relates to state mandates that affect businesses and local governments. And we ought to have a process where any legislator can stop a bill until the fiscal note meets minimum requirements, which is currently not there. Of course, the greatest travesty that we see out there, I shouldn't say greatest, that covers such territory. Greatest is a budget fiasco. But one of the things that's incredible to me is when legislators get bills, huge bills, without enough time to even read them, and they're asked to vote on them. I think the current law says that they can only circumvent the advance notice requirements with a message of necessity from the governor. That has been abused so often that it's virtually meaningless. I would recommend that there be a 2/3 vote to approve a message of necessity. A 2/3 vote requires both the Republican and the majority and the minority to agree that it needs to go through so fast they don't have time to read it. The next thing is a fair allocation of resources. Every legislator represents the same number of people, but the resources allocated to different offices varies widely. And I understand that there are different needs in the different legislative offices, but we need a basic and fair allocation of resources. The last thing, which is, I think, a fascinating opportunity to really improve Albany, is to move forward on initiative and referendum. Clearly, then, we need to look at the budget process. I've given a number of specific reviews, including an independent budget review, much like the Congressional Budget Office, so you know you're dealing with numbers that are real. A 5-year rolling budget process, so you don't have fiscal gimmicks that kick in later years where they push off expenses. Campaign finance reform, I just mentioned that, an astounding statistic. In 2005, there were 200 fundraisers in 61 days. You know.
Nancy? Oh, I'm sorry.
And I would just encourage everybody, by the way, as the campaign goes on, look at who's funding our campaigns. You can pull up our individual campaign reports, look at who's funding our brochures, and that'll give you an idea who we're likely to be supporting when we get to office.
Well, I think the Assembly body needs to be democratized. Assembly members should have the same pay, the same staffing allowance, and the same mailing privileges. The paycheck of every Assembly member should be equalized. No one should make additional money for chairing a committee. Under the current system, the Speaker controls part of the member's salary, and by eliminating all stipends from leadership positions, every member would become more independent of the Speaker. The Assembly should require that committee chairs are elected by the membership, and a chair should be term limited, perhaps to 4 terms at the helm. The chair would also have the authority to hire the committee staff, so that the Speaker couldn't control the member staff. So that's an insistence that every legislator be given the same expenditure level for staff and mailing. I would advocate eliminating member items. Member items corrupt the process, and access to programs is granted unfairly. The Speaker right now has sole discretion in awarding member items, which is a way for him to play favorites as he doles out taxpayers' money. With member items, Assembly members are essentially bribing the voters with their own money. And frankly, it's money borrowed from future generations. Those cardboard checks that show up in the newspaper and with a member's signature in the signatory line is really such a misrepresentation. That money doesn't even exist. It's being borrowed to give back to the people who put it there. And instead, the request would become part, as I'm saying to myself, okay, so if you didn't have member items, then what would you have? You would have sort of a categorical bill program so that each person would vote and decide who receives what in the bigger picture. A recent Rasmussen poll released this fall shows that 7 in 10 respondents want a smaller government, lower taxes, and fewer services. So we have 150 positions on a budget which is going to increase the dysfunction to begin with. 150 people all wanting different things. I'd be open to downsizing the state legislature, specifically the Assembly, which is what this question asks. For the same reasons, I've advocated downsizing the county legislature. If we operated a little bit more like some less dysfunctional states, as Andrew pointed out, the Brennan report, that was in the process when I ran for the Senate in 2005, and I think that it was unnecessarily hard on the Assembly. It was mostly the Senate the Senate had done fewer reforms at that stage than the Assembly. But I think we could talk about states like Vermont, where you actually have a minority member as a committee chair. I mean, that's how generous they are with their fairness. And I wouldn't be beyond, I mean, it's certainly somewhere way down the line, but everybody who feels their state's legislature is dysfunctional looks to Nebraska, where it doesn't really matter. They're all Republicans, but a unicameral legislature would be something that if you really had people serious about reform, you might look at. And the rules, as I said, of the New York State Assembly don't permit very generous opportunities for the minority. I think we want to reform this. I support establishing term limits. And I say this because I saw a beautiful thing happen in the Chautauqua County Legislature. I understand First Amendment. I understand the reasons against term limits. I understand that Bloomberg, no sooner was he saying he was for them than he decided he liked his job and he wanted that rule changed in the city of New York. But I watched Gil McKenna, and I watched Maria Kimberg, and I watched Bruce Kidder, three people from all different parties who put in their time, did a good job, were respected, decided to roll off for a while, did other things, had some babies, I don't know, whatever floated their boat, and then put themselves out there again. So there was an interim person working on behalf of those constituents. But if you miss it that much, and you think you were that great, and the people think you were that great, go back and do it again. And the one way you could do it again is to make these elections fair. It doesn't relate directly to the question, but the pledges of the New York Uprising, there's three of them. One is the 5-year rolling monitoring of a budget that is part of that pledge. Another one is transparency and gap principles. A third one is that you would have an independent and impartial commission draw the lines of the new districts. Because right now they are a jigsaw puzzle.
It will actually result in a substantial shift in power away from the speaker and away from the one-man rule that's dominated for so many years. Nancy, you mentioned the brochures. Yeah, I just find it ironic when the Democrat Assembly Committee, which are the ones that raise all of our taxes and fees, including the sales tax on clothes that just kicked in time for all the Christmas shopping, are the ones that sponsor ads saying we shouldn't be used as Albany's ATM. They're the ones that are using us as Albany's ATM.
The committee?
The Democrat Assembly.
And they're not the same thing.
Well, the state Democrat who are running Albany, they're the ones that have been using us as Albany's
People
ATM.
also like Capital Play that contribute to both sides to hedge their bets.
You know,
They're not alone.
I've addressed that as well, and I think there should be substantial restrictions on what can be paid by anybody doing business with the state. I am glad to note that I believe they complied fully with all current restrictions, as far as I know. They're not contributions enacting. But I just find it ironic that the very people who got us into this mess are the ones that are paying for all of our mailings.
As far as brochures and where support is coming from, I understand where Mr. Goodell is going with this, and I will say that it's the first time I've had the support of my party like this, and I'm proud of that. I know that he knows that one of his favorite elected officials, our state senator, has operated this way, defensible or not, for a long time.